Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and we've got something super cool to take a look at today. As you can see, we have the very first Dino Trackers minis from Mattel. So we are now past the Dominion line. We are now moving on to Dino Trackers with pretty much everything, and obviously we've got the minis to go with that. And I do want to give a huge shout out and a thank you to my good buddy Brandon, who was awesome enough to hook me up with these figures. There are only a select few in this wave, in the initial wave of the Dino Trackers minis, that are new to the line. A lot of them are repeats from the Dominion line, so I didn't need all of them. He was able to acquire me all of the ones that I needed. So again, a huge thank you goes out to my buddy Brandon. Thank you so much, my friend. So what we've got this round, you can actually see again as far as the packaging goes, you've got Velociraptor Blue and Beta right there on the front, which is pretty much how the Dino Trackers packaging seems to work with all of their figures. But up here on the top, you can now see a checklist basically of all of the figures in the very first wave of Dino Trackers minis, most of which we again have already had. There are only a select few that we have not had yet, so we're going to go ahead and pop these open, and they should be the ones that again are new to the line. So let's pop this one open. If we actually, where is the numbers? I somehow have lost them. So you can see, where are the numbers? There they are. So we've got the numbers right here. You can see which ones, again, would tell you which figures are contained within. And this one is the set with... Okay, we've got the Sarcosuchus and the Kentrosaurus. So immediately a really exciting group of figures right there. The Sarcosuchus specifically, I was really amped up to see in person. I kind of wish they would have gave it the very first paint scheme for the Sarcosuchus rather than that one. And then you again have another slip of paper here, which gives you again a checklist here to show off the different figures in this wave of minis and which ones you may need and you may not need if you have some from the older lines. The next one that will go ahead and give you the numbers for right there, you can see, so you can tell which one the figure would be in store again if you are out looking for them. So we'll pop this out. We've got the Allosaurus and Pteranodon in this one. Now I don't know if the Allosaurus is different from the previously released Allosaurus that was in that kind of multi-pack set that released a while back with Dominion, but this is definitely the first time we've had the Allosaurus in the main line to my knowledge. And then for the underside of this one, you can see again the number we're looking at, and then we'll pop them out. This, like, the cardboard is just so cheap on these ones for some reason. It's just like ripping right apart as soon as you try to open it. There we go, we popped that off. The tape was holding it on. And this one, first of all, something jumped out there. I don't know what that was. That was the Herrerasaurus jumping out. And then we've got the Amargasaurus, which is a really exciting one as well. If only Mattel would bring the Amargasaurus back in the main line. That's one figure that I think everybody would love to see get a repaint, but for some reason hasn't yet. In the final, actually, let's give you the numbers first. Where did I find them? There they are. On the underside, you can check the number right there to see which one we've got in here. And the final one is the Ouranosaurus and Majungasaurus. So probably the most exciting of all because I am a huge fan of both of those species. So there are all of the new species and new figures entering the line. The Allosaurus, again, I'm a little 50-50 on. I don't know for sure if that's the same Allosaurus, and at this point, I have no idea where the original one was in my collection, so I'm not going to bother looking for it. I have that stuff kind of, they're so small, like they're impossible to find in this collection. But you can see, again, definitely a whole bunch of new species this time around, which is super exciting. So let's jump to a closer look at all of these right now. So the first figure, and the one that, again, is kind of in question as to whether or not it's new, is the Allosaurus. And again, I believe it's the same one that was in that kind of multi-pack that was released at Target a ways back, but the one thing that is good about this one is if you didn't purchase that set, because say maybe you had quite a few of the other figures that were included, you now have the chance to buy this one in the main line. And you can see it looks pretty much like the Allosaurus figure does from the older release of the Mattel Allosaurus, and also sporting again that bluish paint scheme, which is very Battle at Big Rock-like. As always, Mattel delivers a fantastic sculpt with their Allosaurus. Really nice looking detail. You've of course got those almost Papo-like ridges running down the spinal column of the Allosaurus, and you also have eyes painted, but unfortunately no pupils. It's only yellow for the eye. There is no pupil, but the fact that we at least have eye paint is a plus. There were some minis recently that I had purchased and reviewed here that actually had pupils, and I was really excited about that. Thought maybe they would continue to do that, but obviously they have chosen not to, at least with the Allosaurus. The figure as a whole only has a few different tones of color. You could see the blue here on the back and then a lighter tone for the underside. That's really about it. I don't really see much of a speckling, maybe slightly a bluish speckling, but it's very, very few and far between throughout the course of the figure. And again, the eye paint, we do have an articulated jaw. Nice looking detailing, of course, for the inside of the mouth. Nicely sculpted tongue and teeth and everything, but no paintwork in there. Still pretty cool. Definitely nice to have another Allosaurus in the line, even though I would have actually liked to have seen maybe a repaint or something for this, but still pretty nice as far as that one goes. Now, the Pteranodon definitely looks to be the same Pteranodon that we had in the past, which kind of also leads me to believe that potentially this is the, again, same Allosaurus that we had before, because it seems like a lot of the new species were put in with other new species and the new figures put in with other new figures, whereas this one definitely looks to be the same Pteranodon that we had previously. Still a really nice one. I do like the colors that they've chosen for it, and of course the detailing is quite phenomenal as a whole for the Pteranodon, but no eye paint, of course. So that is a little bit of a downside for this Pteranodon. Yeah, no eye paint at all, but still pretty darn nice looking figure, just not really one we need to go over. Then we've got ourselves the mini Sarcosuchus, and this one definitely looks really nice. I'd actually like to get another one of these and repaint it, because the sculpt looks really, really good for what it is. You can see that our mouth is open on our Sarcosuchus. It overall resembles very nicely the second version of the Sarcosuchus that we had released in the Mattel line. You can see the teeth are sculpted pretty nicely, but they just kind of blend with the jaw, because that lighter gray of the jaw kind of runs up there right along the jaw line, and the teeth kind of blend with it. Whereas if they would have made the entire head, I think that, purplish tone and just kept the teeth gray, they would have really shined a lot more. But you can see that we have a very, very long tongue sculpted out on the inside of the mouth, but also some nicely sculpted teeth for the lower jaw. The overall texturing to the Sarcosuchus looks really, really good. Of course, we don't have eye paint. I don't know why they have chosen to skip out on the eye paint again on this one. It doesn't take much to really add eye paint, on our part, but we shouldn't have to do it. Like, it wouldn't take much more than just a quick black peck with a toothpick and some paint, and that would fix that right up. But again, it's not really our responsibility to have to paint the figures when they should come with eye paint in the first place. But as you move back a little further into the Sarcosuchus, you can again see that we have some really nice, heavily armored type of a texturing to the back of the Sarcosuchus. We continue to have that purplish coloration running along. We have this little splotchy area of orange here on the side, and then a light gray for the lower part of the Sarcosuchus. There's a really nice curve to the body. You can see the upper part is slightly curved to the right, and the tail curves out very nicely. And of course, you can also see that the purple tapers off there as we lead out into the tail. We have a random splotch of what looks to be like a reddish coloration. Oh my goodness, the camera does not want to focus on it right there. Don't know why, but that's the only spot that I really see that in. You can see that the other side of the sculpt again looks really, really good. The overall detailing again looks phenomenal throughout the course of the entire figure. And then we have some pretty nice looking, oh man, we have some pretty nice looking detailing here for the underside. This might be the biggest disaster as far as a review of a mini so far, because I think it's just because the light gray color of the Sarcosuchus just meshes so nicely with my backdrop there. Like, it's really hard for the camera to focus on it, but definitely a fan of the Sarcosuchus. I think sculpt-wise, it looks really nice. Paint-wise, it's okay. Again, I would have preferred the first paint scheme that we had on a Mattel Sarcosuchus over this one, but it still looks pretty good. Then we've got ourselves the Kentrosaurus, and the Kentrosaurus looks awesome, and I'm very intrigued to see that we have a different coloration rather than the brownish tones that we had for the Kentrosaurus from Camp Cretaceous. We have kind of like a tannish type of a tone and then a green running along the top of the dinosaur, and that's really about it as far as coloration goes. I do see a speckling, but it's not super abundant throughout the course of the figure. Again, if my camera would focus on it, no eye paint, no paint at all on the face at all, actually. Like, we don't have a paint work for the beak or anything, so it's really unfortunate that Mattel continues to skimp out on the eye paint of these figures. I don't know why they keep doing that, but I do like the design of the green. I like how it overtakes the majority of the back and then stripes down in the stomach. That looks super cool. I wouldn't mind seeing a Mattel mainline release of the Kentrosaurus, again with a repaint like this, similar to this, just with a little bit more paintwork, of course. But you can see that the texturing to the skin looks great. The detailing there in the plates looks awesome. As we move out, again, we lose focus because for some reason a lot of these figures seem to be a lighter tone that meshes very poorly with my backdrop. In typical Mattel style, of course, the tail is a bit too short on the Kentrosaurus, but it's not too far off. You can kind of see almost like an armored scoot-like appearance running along the back of the Kentrosaurus, running down the spinal column. Very nice curve there at the end of the tail. I actually really quite like that curve. And if we take a look over here at the opposing side, you can again see it looks really, really quite nice on both sides. Definitely a beautiful minifigure Kentrosaurus, and definitely a really nice entry into the line, one we did not have prior in the minifigures. So, very exciting as far as that goes. And the detailing of the underside also looks pretty good. So, this one is really quite nice. I definitely am a fan of that one. We also have a Herrerasaurus in the line now, which is one we didn't have prior, but unfortunately, you can see it's definitely the same sculpt as the original Herrerasaurus, which is sad because we have a newly released Herrerasaurus in the Strike Attack range for Dino Trackers, which is absolutely gorgeous and so much better than the older one. But unfortunately for the minifigure, it has chosen to kind of replicate the older one, and does definitely look like the older one. But look at the size of the feet compared to every other body part on this figure. Those feet are huge, as they usually are for minis, but those ones are exceptionally huge. And the tail is super short on this one. I feel like it's even shorter than they usually are. The majority of the figure, though, sculpt-wise, does look very nice for what it is. Again, for being so small, like the detailing there in the head looks really good. You can see the teeth and everything. The mouth is sculpted in an open position. It does not have an articulated jaw. Unfortunately, no eye paint, which seems to be the case with all of these minis this time around, aside from the Allosaurus. And you can see that primarily we have a greenish tone, and then we have an orange here kind of running and splotching down the course of the back. But it starts in the neck, ends before we even really reach the tail. You can again see that the opposing side also looks pretty good, but I would say this is probably the least appealing out of the figures that we've taken a look at so far. It's cool to have a Herrerasaurus in the new minifigure line, but it just isn't really that great, especially considering it's replicating the older version of the Herrerasaurus from Mattel, which wasn't really all that great of a figure, but it still is okay, just not really anything to go crazy over. And then we have what might be the nicest minifigure of all of these new ones, the Ouranosaurus, and I'm super psyched to have an Ouranosaurus in the minifigure line, especially because now we don't have to have an Ouranosaurus with that button on the side, so this one looks even better than the mainline version, I think. But again, sculpt-wise, look at how nice that is. For something so small, Mattel really does a great job of cramming a lot of detail into their figures. And again, the paintwork is very reminiscent of the very first release of the Ouranosaurus from Mattel. In the main line, you can see that we have like this yellowish tone there, kind of leading up from the throat into the face. No eye paint, again, as usual. And then we have a green for the majority of the body, and then this light yellowish tone that kind of runs through the course of the back of our Ouranosaurus. But the skin texture is incredible. I'm definitely picking up on a speckling on this one as well. You can see like black speckles and stuff. I really wish they would just start to give these figures a little bit more effort as far as the paint, because imagine how nice this would look if it had painted eyes and painted nails. We used to get painted eyes all the time. I don't know what's going on. Mattel is just like losing their paint apps continuously, as again, we never really got much as far as the way of nail paint, but now we don't even get eye paint on a lot of the minis. But I will say, even though they're kind of skimping out in paint apps, the actual detailing looks to be, better than ever on these minis, because this Ouranosaurus is honestly phenomenal when it comes to the sculpting and detailing aspect, like overloaded with really nice detail. You've got all the muscle definition you would want to see. You've got the rib cage even showing here in the stomach region. So that is one really nice Ouranosaurus. Definitely one of my favorites from this wave of minis, no doubt about that. I love Ouranosaurus. We just don't get enough figures of Ouranosaurus, but that one specifically, again, is just beautiful. And then we've got the Majungasaurus, and this is another one that I was really hyped about because it's another one of my favorite species. And yet again, it looks pretty much like the mainline version did, but a little bit less paint apps, of course. You do have some really nice looking sculpt and detail to it, though. You can see the nice osteoderms, some ridges running along the back, and you have that look to the tail like we had on the larger one. also to the backs of the legs. You can see that the head is, turned to the left a little bit. You've also got the mouth sculpted in an open position. You can see the tongue in there. The teeth are also quite nicely sculpted. Again, no eye paint, because that seems to be the way all of these are, but you also do have, again, some really nice sculpt and detail in the face. If you don't have eye paint, at least we get nice detailing. And you also have that greenish tone that kind of designs there all through the face and runs down into like the shoulder area, mid-back area, and then just is gone. And we have no other coloration leading out through the course of the figure. Not sure if I really see a speckling on this one. Like, it's not something that I'm picking up on too easily. If it is, it's a dark speckling, so it's not kind of jumping out at me. Probably would have looked nicer with a lighter speckling if it does have one at all. But again, just like with the others, the sculpt is really nice and definitely would be another fun figure to repaint. And it's actually been a long time since I repainted some minis. So maybe if I can find another round, actually if I can find a first round, because I had to get these from my friend Brandon, but if I could find a round of these minis somewhere in store, I might snatch some of them up and give them some repaints, because I feel like they could look really, really good, because the detail is great on these. It's just the paint apps not so much. Not that we ever had great paint apps on the minis to begin with, but I feel like, the lack of eye paint really is a travesty for these figures. But again, a really nice one. Definitely fun to see the Majungasaurus now in the line. There's a lot of others that Mattel could release in the line that they've released species-wise, so hopefully we'll continue this trend with new species. And the final is the Amargasaurus, and this one might be, I would say, even nicer potentially than the Ouranosaurus. There's a good chance, because, look at that head sculpt, if it would focus on it. That is a beautiful, beautiful head sculpt. No eye paint, of course, but still a beautiful head sculpt. As you move back into the neck, you start to see, again, those trademark spines sticking up here in the back, and you can see that we have a dark gray for the majority of that area, but there's also some of those reddish tones. And again, this is very reminiscent to the Amargasaurus we saw in the main line. Pretty much exactly the same as far as the coloration goes, and of course the sculpt, even the positioning of the body looks to be the same. And we also again have that darker tone, which actually looks more like a dark brown now that I'm seeing it, more so than a dark gray. But you can see it runs along the back of the Ouranosaurus before disappearing here as we lead out into the tail. But, it actually has some of the nicest paint apps of all of the minis we've taken a look at today, because we have quite a few different tones of color, as we have the light brown for the majority of the body, we have the darker brown up here on the back, and we actually have some red running through spines in the neck. So a little bit more paint apps than a lot of them have had. We have a nice curve there for the tail. Just like with the others, the sculpt is just gorgeous on the Amargasaurus. We do have articulation on this one. You can articulate the neck just like you actually could on the mainline version. So the Amargasaurus, I'm actually going to go ahead and say this is my favorite from this wave of minis, with the Ouranosaurus being a very, very close second. But that Amargasaurus right there is just absolutely beautiful, just like the original Amargasaurus release was from Mattel, which I wish, again, they'd give us another version of. But definitely a really nice Amargasaurus. Very cool to see some articulation on this one, because the large majority of these figures didn't really have articulation. I think the only other one that we looked at today that did was the Allosaurus, so it is nice to have some articulation here on the Amargasaurus. Regardless, still a really cool round of minis, because we actually got quite a few new species this time. Now let's see how they all balance, if they balance good or not. The Majungasaurus is standing pretty nicely. The Allosaurus is standing nicely. Of course, the Kentrosaurus will stand nicely. It's quadrupedal. The Pteranodon doesn't have the opportunity to stand at all. It's smaller ones like the Herrerasaurus that I usually encounter problems with, but look at that, it's standing. Of course, the Amargasaurus will stand, and actually the rest of them will all stand, because they're all quadrupedal past this point. But still again, really cool round of minis, and the majority of them seem like they stand pretty nicely. As far as the size goes, even though I don't really feel like we need one, we'll just put the tape measure here over the top, because I'm not going to measure each and every one. They're the mini figures from Mattel. At this point, you probably have a pretty good idea as far as what the size is of these minifigures, but if not, for a size comparison, there is Mr. Papo T-Rex, the Attack Pack Allosaurus, and Robert Muldoon from the Mattel Jurassic World toy line, next to our Dino Tracker minifigures. And you can definitely see, again, they're exactly as you would expect them to be, very, very small. So if you happen to have never seen any of the minifigures prior, then hopefully this will help to give you an idea of the size. But if you have seen minifigures, especially, in the Dominion line, then you'll already know roughly what the size is of all of these. So honestly, the Mattel minifigures are something that I get so excited about continuously. It's probably one of my favorite lines from Mattel, and it was so sad to see the line dying out right before Dominion. we really weren't getting much of anything. So really thankful to Dominion for kind of reviving the line, bringing it back, and actually giving us a plethora of figures in the Dominion line. But again, this time around, we are now moving into Dino Trackers, and it looks like we're still going to focus on the minifigure line as a whole, because we do have quite a few new species this time around, which is really exciting. The Ouranosaurus is definitely one of my favorites overall for this wave, because it is a very, very cool species, one we get very few figures of, and again, the Mattel version specifically I think is gorgeous, so it was really neat to actually have a minifigure version coming, and I think they did a great job on that one. Definitely nice as far as the paint apps go as well. Of course, it would have been nice to have eye paint, but that can be said for all of these. The Pteranodon is the same figure we had previously, so that really isn't all that exciting because, again, we've actually had it a bunch of times, I think, at this point. It's still a cool figure, just nothing to really rave about. The Allosaurus as well, it looks to be the same figure that we had prior. Still really nice. It's a beautiful sculpt with some okay paint, and it does actually have eye paint, which makes it a little bit better than some of the others here, but it's not really that exciting because it's not a new species like the Herrerasaurus. But the Herrerasaurus, unfortunately, is the older sculpt that they've kind of recreated here in minifigure form. I definitely would have liked to have seen the newer version because it's way better than this one, but still an okay figure, just probably the weakest of all that we have here. The Sarcosuchus is quite beautiful overall and definitely one worth a repaint because the sculpting and detailing is just gorgeous on that figure. The paint job is okay, it's not really that great because, again, I would have really liked to have seen the original version kind of created in minifigure form because I felt like the coloration and tones of color were a lot more natural on the original version, but this version's okay as well and it still looks pretty cool and definitely cool in minifigure form. The Majungasaurus is super exciting because I love Majungasaurus, and we also have very few figures out of Majungasaurus, so having a minifigure now is quite awesome. Probably one of the least appealing as far as this round goes when it comes to paint apps, because there's really not much going on with that one, but still a really nice looking sculpt. Then you've got the Kentrosaurus, which shockingly is a very different coloration from the mainline version, which was, a little bit unexpected for me, but it's still a pretty cool looking figure, very nice sculpt, and a pretty nice looking paint job. Like, not great, but I do like the tones of color chosen, and I like the design that they've given it. And then you also have the Amargasaurus, which in my opinion is probably the standout for this wave, because it's just overall a very nice representation of the previously released Mattel Amargasaurus. It also has some of the nicest paint apps out of all of the figures in this wave, and has articulation in the neck, which is also a big plus for that one. So as a whole, these are some pretty darn cool figures and definitely worth picking up, especially the new species. Of course, the other ones that are in the line we have already had in previous waves, but they're still really cool figures as well. If you happen to not have collected the others or you didn't have a chance, then quite a few of the other figures are definitely worth picking up as well. It's just that these are the only ones that are actually new to this wave, so I felt like these were the only ones that I really needed to get a hold of and review. So again, make sure you check your local Walmart, and hopefully you'll be able to encounter these now or at least soon and pick them up if you can find them. And also like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.